Hi, this is Dr. Ben Morrill. Welcome to episode 90 of Reptile Genetics Weekly. Made it to 90, 10 more to get to 100. Pretty cool. And I think April is when we'll hit our 2-year mark. That's going to be extra crazy. It's gone by really fast, but yeah, lots of fun episodes. And today, we recently, I think a couple of weeks back, we gave some updated specific information about Ultramel and the mutations, the Ultramel A, Ultramel B. We have a really cool opportunity today to talk to someone that's been working the Ultramel project for many years, and he spent some time these last few days looking up history and some of the old information and pictures. We're really thankful to have Ryan on here to talk about that today. But yeah, the for sample updates, we've got, as you all know, with Christmas last week, we only had results go out until Tuesday, and then we took the rest of the week off. This week, I know we've got fast results going out today, tomorrow, probably not on Wednesday since it's a holiday, and I would imagine at least Thursday or Friday, and maybe both, because we hope that, well, I guess not really hope, we just kind of assume that things will slow down, and thankfully they haven't really. You all keep samples coming, and we appreciate it. That really helps us through this time of the year, or we're worried we may not have enough money to pay the bills for everything. We really appreciate lots of samples coming through. So yeah, it might be every day except for Wednesday this week that we'll have fast results going out, and we'll have at least one set of sex determination going out this week, maybe two. We might have it early in the weekend, late in the week. And then we do, speaking of lots of samples still coming in, we do have enough panels coming through. I thought it was going to be another 2 or 3 weeks, but it sounds like probably late this week or early next week, I'll start another run for panels. So thank you once again for samples coming in, and so we'll get panels going quicker. And that also means more research data coming through too. So not any specific research data update today yet, and next week it might not be, since this episode will be going out on Tuesday next week. But it won't be much longer, and we'll have some really exciting big announcement. Maybe we'll have to do an extra episode or a live or something, but we've got some fun stuff to talk about, and it's coming together nicely. So I was hoping it would be before the end of December, but looking like it's going to be a week or two behind what I was hoping for, but it is going really well. Very, very excited for that. So, but yeah, that's it. That's what I've got for updates. Kayla, how are you doing?
Hey, Ben, I'm doing great. Glad to be back on. I'm excited for the new year. And, I'm excited to talk about the even more Ultramel business here today with Ryan. So it's really cool. And here, let's go ahead and knock out some business stuff so we can get to the real meat of this episode. For those of you who aren't aware, we do have custom bundle shed testing through our vendors, Clutch and Morph Market. So if you don't want to do a full panel test on your animals, you can save money by bundling them together, or build your own a la carte style, however you want to call it. And through whichever vendor you use, you can save money by getting, 2, 3, 4, 5 different tests all in one, testing for a mutation for each one of those. And it is only $10 to add more on after 5. So it's definitely worth it if you are getting into a new project, or if you want to prove out some hets on a new animal you've just gotten. So definitely worth a shot. And apparently a lot of people have been taking advantage of that, because you've been keeping our winter time, which is normally our slow season, very busy. Awesome.
Yeah, and then if you do have many animals, so that was multiple tests on single animals. If you have many animals you want to do testing on, whether it's single or multiple, definitely shoot an email to Sean at raregeninc@gmail.com. And that's our quantity discount. That's our way to do quantity discounts for you. So just send that email to Sean, let him know what all you've got, what all you want to test for, and he can give you a custom quote for exactly what you're looking for. And that helps us a lot to be able to do those as groups. And so we were able to hand some savings to you that way too.
So last week, we talked about all the sheds that we're wanting, for ball pythons. We are looking at completing some of our complexes, such as 8-ball, fire, blue-eyed Lucy, yellow belly. There's another one I'm for spider.
Spider.
Yeah, we're looking at completing some of our complexes. And so if you have any of these sheds from any of these animals, whether they are hets or homozygous, visuals, etc., we'd love to have it. And we got a huge turnout, at least as far as the comments told us, for what we're looking for.
Before we go to that, I do want to
Yeah.
point out we did add 3 to the top there that
Yes.
Kayla's got asterisks there for. So Stranger, Mahogany, Nyala, those are ones that we're wanting to run a bunch on. So especially if you have like a homozygous Stranger, a homozygous, you know, the super Stranger, super Nyala, super Mahogany, those are really helpful right now. And on top of that, I didn't warn Kayla of this, but we'll give her a little extra work.
That's fine.
If you're sending us homozygous animals for any of these, any supers, if you're sending us, you know, super this or that, if you can email Kayla a picture, any of them that are homozygous, those are especially helpful to us. And that way we can show a picture once we develop, like if you send us some super Nyala, super Stranger or something like that, we can show the pictures and with your name or business name or whatever it is, and be able to give you some credit, especially for those homozygous animals that are going to really help us.
Definitely. And I just, there we go. Just put up the banner. So if you want to shoot us an email or email me pictures, the way Ben just suggested, you can email me at raregeneticsocial@gmail.com.
Yeah, that is perfect right now because we're doing tons of this.
Yeah. So let's go to just the Facebook post. Instagram got a lot of attention too, but figure we'll scroll through and show you some of the comments we got.
And comments in the YouTube too. We got lots everywhere. Thank you all so much.
We are grateful. And so a reptile, hi Aria. Let's see, we have Hypo Huffman's coming in, someone with the pre-lay shed. Ben was in there commenting as well. There's just this morning.
And with my great computer skills, I'm there as Benson Morrill instead of RGI, but it is me.
Okay. It's okay. If you don't know who that is, just look at the beard and you'll know. And and we got a few common questions too. Let's see. Sending in a test soon for Wookiee. On all of these. Okay, so from Sharon Skinner, she asks, I have one that has het, red, axanthic, and cinnamon. Do we just send to that address with the info requested, or do we buy a shed and send it to you first?
Yeah, so you are definitely helping us get new test designs. So there's definitely no need to pay for anything. You literally just snail mail it to us to that address that's on that slide. You can also, if you're not watching on YouTube, or it's another time, you can always go to Rare Genetics website and go to help us, and that gives you that PO box to send sheds for new tests also.
Yes.
And as far as what to tell us, because several people did ask, like, do they have to be the single morph, or can it be a combo? Definitely combos work great.
Yeah.
What we need, there's specific information we need when you are sending a combo, and we have a slide to kind of show you that. So when you're sending those in, if you have the animal ID, so just whatever the name is for that animal, for us to be able to let you know what we see or whatever later on. So the animal ID, it can be a name or a number. If it's shorter, that's better than listing out all of the genes for it, because that makes it hard for us to keep track. If we have like a simple name or number, that helps. And then give us all the known morphs it has, all the possible morphs it has, and then let us know produced by. So you can just say self if you hash it out yourself, or tell us the breeder that produced them, and then any lineage information that you have. So you could say, it's self-produced, but I got, one of the parents from Canova, the other one from, Ryan Young and Molecular Reptiles. Just let us know some of the lineage, because that helps us if we only have room to run, 20 of something, and we can see the lineage information. That way we can make sure we use as variable. You can cover all the lineages as possible if we have some of that lineage information. That will make it so we can get these tests done faster, since I know you all are always asking us, why is it taking so long? Well, that lineage information will help us make it a little more efficient and fast. So.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually lineage info is actually kind of related to our main topic today too. So
yes.
All right. So if you do send us sheds, all of this information is super useful. So thank you guys for all of you who are getting sheds together to send. We really appreciate you. And so moving right along, let's talk about Ultramel, and we'll bring on our guest now, Mr. Ryan Young of Molecular Reptile. Hi, Ryan.
How's it going?
Doing good. Glad to have you.
Glad to have you. Yes. And as we were just talking about people sending in sheds to help do research on new mutations, that's something Ryan's been doing for many years now.
Well, it's pretty painless. Throw them in a bag and put them in the mail. So I figured easy enough to do my part for some science.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Very thankful. And I know Dr. Sadell, we'll talk a little bit about how, you probably helped make the Ultramel part of her paper on the albinos. You probably added to that significantly with the bloodlines that you were working with. But yeah, so I guess, first of all, Ryan, why don't you tell everyone just, kind of how long you've been working as with reptiles, breeding, and what species you've worked with?
All right. I guess typical story, was interested in reptiles as a kid. My parents weren't too keen on it, so I didn't keep that many as a kid. I had some turtles and a rubber boa and an iguana and stuff. I had a big wild-caught ball python for a few years in middle school, but didn't have it, I don't know, 3-4 years probably. And then I became interested in my own species and got rid of most of the reptiles for a while. But as soon as I graduated from high school and moved out, I was like, oh, it's time to get some reptiles. So
yeah,
at the time I got a chondro. So that was probably 1998, something like that. And started keeping mostly pythons were what drove me the most. And so started working with all the chondros, and I had Ancherisa and carpets and stuff back then. And then I thought, man, I want to make a living doing this. So I decided I was going to start buying ball python morphs in the early 2000s, and I met Dave and Tracy Barker from doing that. And that was convenient because I looked up to them a lot anyways because of all their work with the other python species.
Yeah.
So,
and for younger listeners that may not know that name, that the VPI, like our VPI Xanthic, that's Dave and Tracy.
Yeah.
So for some of the younger listeners who may not know that name, VPI, that's Dave and Tracy. So they play a big part in bringing various species of pythons and getting them to reproduce in captivity, and then also some of the morph mutations.
Yep. So when I started wanting to buy ball pythons, I had bought some het albinos from VPI, and my wife's family lived in Dallas, and so we used to go down there. We were broke young married couples, so we'd go to her parents' house for a couple weeks. And I was finally, after years of begging Tracy to let me come visit, she was like, okay. And so I made the drive from Dallas to Bernie to hang out with them. And that's where I saw the burgundy albino for the first time. And I was just like, wow, that is the snake for me. Yeah.
This is where you saw the first burgundy albino.
Yeah, that's my photo of her at my house, but that's not when I first saw her. It was probably, I don't know, 2002, 2001, something like that.
She's gorgeous.
And, she's not a happy snake.
Oh, really?
Very, very shy and then quick to anger. So
I like
it took Tracy a long time. I think it took her 8 years to breed that snake in captivity. She came in as a wild caught adult. And so for years I was just hounding Tracy, like, come on, you got to breed that thing. But it's really hard to breed adult female pythons. We take it for granted now, but wild adult female pythons are historically pretty difficult to breed. And She put Tracy through the ringer, but finally started breeding in 2008, I believe, is when she laid the first eggs.
Okay.
Very nice.
And I was fortunate enough to convince Tracy to let me get a pair of the hets from that
Mhm.
clutch.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I was that's what started my Ultramel and enamored fascination.
So at that point, when you found the Burgundy, I would imagine nobody really knew that there were actually different lines, right? There's kind of different, like, I guess, points where these animals made it into the United States, but not really a knowledge of whether they were compatible or, things like that.
Yeah, it was a real tricky situation. The caramel ball, or the snake that later became the caramel ball, everybody just kind of assumed they were all the same thing because they looked similar. And so what ended up happening was, that's actually the snake. I believe, from the information I've been told, that's the very first snake that was called a caramel. And then like the McCurley caramel and the Bell Line caramel and VPI even had a caramel. Those were all a different mutation, but nobody realized it at the time. This was back, they didn't have the photograph quality, and and then people didn't nitpick stuff near as hard either. It was kind of like, oh, it looks like that's the same thing. And
So the animal that was the first that now we know is the Ultramel got called a caramel.
Yeah, as far as I know, it was the snake that was originally given the name caramel. Okay. But that animal in particular, bred a few times for Ernie. And I'm forgive me if I make mistakes. This was a long time ago, and I don't know all the particulars. But I know from what I've been told, Ernie bred the snake. It was a male, and it passed away before it had a chance to breed back to its daughters. And some of those daughters were sent to the Bells because they had a caramel, and those snakes got bred and produced normals. And I'm not sure what the Bells. I don't know if the Bells kept any of that stuff or not. I know they sent they sold the male babies as guaranteed het caramel and didn't say anything about the possibility of another thing. So I don't know if they just assumed Ernie's thing wasn't anything, or it didn't father those daughters, or I don't know. I can't speak for what happened in their head. But those snakes, one of those snakes went through Peter Call and ended up with Vin Russo, and went on to make Vin Russo's Camarillos, which are the combination of an Ultramel and a regular caramel.
Okay.
So that's how that. And so, as far as I know, Vin Russo was the first person to produce from that Ernie Wagner lineage, and that was in 2005.
Okay.
And then Eric Kreider also ended up getting animals from that lineage, and in 2007 he produced them for the first time, and I got one of those from his first clutch, and the other one went to Matt Lear, and they were called Kreider caramels at the time. Because the other problem was regular caramels, the word had gotten out about the female fecundity not being good and a lot of spinal kinking problems. And so a lot of people were really hesitant about these other caramels because they thought they would be fraught with problems like those ones. And so it was really difficult to show people that these were actually different. And Vin Russo's clutch, when I did the history tracking down and figured out, that was like, oh yeah, not only are they different, but here's both of them in the same snake, the 1 in 16 combinations. So that went a long ways towards helping that. But
yeah, because I would imagine, like, having put significant amount of money and time into it, that was very frustrating to find out that something that's not even related but just looks similar and has problems was making people not want to buy what you're making.
Yeah, well, I mean, luckily for me, it was actually probably better timing for me because the Ultramel stuff wasn't crazy expensive, because there was the fear, and so I was able to get animals before I had Ultramel stuff before, that it was really known to be different.
Yeah.
And so my conversations with Tracy, I'm like, look, these are different. And she was like, obviously going, yeah, they're different, because she called the Burgundy albino something different right off the bat, because she had a regular caramel female. And she's like, yeah, these aren't the same thing. You just take one look at them. And it's clearly not the same thing. But back in the old days with the photos, I don't think anybody had ever seen Ernie Wagner's animal in person, other than Ernie being up in the Pacific Northwest. There wasn't a lot of other. I know Casey had seen the animal. Kreider had probably seen the animal, but not, not the masses, so to speak. So his animal just almost kind of disappeared into obscurity. And probably, if it wasn't for Vin Russo and Eric, that animal probably, its bloodline would have just ended. Bells never did anything with it. So I think on Morse Market they list the Bells as being the one that proved it out, and that's as far as I know, that's false.
You can tell just on this scan of a from the 1995 Reptiles magazine, the year I was born, actually. I'm baby.
Yeah, the one on the left is the Reptiles magazine, and the one on the right is that's from Captive Breeder magazine.
Yeah, nope. Was that probably similar?
Yeah, that was the Captive Breeder was in 1994, and the article on the left was from 1995.
Okay, yeah. But you can tell that, the pictures, it's nice quality, but you can tell the color is off. And I blew up this side from the from Reptiles magazine, and you can tell that, while it's I find it interesting that, this is really early days for some morphs, and I can see how it could get kind of lost in the noise. Also, I love the speculation, like the top left, about the piebald ball python. People thinking, oh, well, it's, some experts think that it might be a temperature-derived variant rather than something you can reproduce genetically, which we know different now. But I love that little detail in there.
Yeah, it was the very early days. So.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think David Northcott shot photos of that snake, and I think he was in Reptiles magazine articles a couple other times. I think he was in a Barker article in 1999. And at the time, they mentioned something about there was several wild, caramels. They referred to them all as caramels. And at the time, they had said none of them had proven out yet. So they, it's just a nice little blurb from 1999.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So what about these guys here? You sent these pictures as well.
So
where do they fit in?
The picture on the upper right is from Eric Kreider's clutch, I believe, in 2007. And that was when he first produced from the Ernie Wagner snake, from heads from that. And the female, and that picture on the left is the female I acquired, and she's the baby on the right.
Oh,
in that photo. So
beautiful.
Pretty.
And I still have her. She's one of my favorite snakes.
She's gorgeous. I can see why.
Yeah. She's more easygoing than the Burgundy female. the Burgundy female's a look, don't touch snake. She's
I like
but she's laid a lot of, the Burgundy's laid quite a few eggs since she took a long time to start breeding, but she's made up for it later on in life. So.
Atta girl.
So you hatched her out because you started with a pair of heads?
The Burgundy?
Mm-hmm.
No, the Burgundy's that's the founder. That's the wild snake that BPI imported in 2000.
Okay. Cool.
They produced hets in 2008. I acquired a pair of those hets, and in 2012, I produced the first Burgundy. Yeah, right there. So I got the perfect odds. I had a 4-egg clutch and 1 out of 4 from head to head. So
I bet you were happy that day.
Oh man, I was over the moon. That was the first Ultramel I ever. That was the first Ultra. Now we call them Ultramels. But that was the first Ultramel I ever hatched, and I still have that snake to this day. So.
Awesome.
I love that snake.
Oh, I bet.
So cool.
That's a lot of time and dedication to get to that point.
Yes, it is.
And later, I was fortunate that after I was able to talk Tracy out of the entire Burgundy project later on, and she sent it to me, and then we worked it together. But so
Yeah.
I drove her nuts, man. She was like, "Why do you like that thing so much?" Well,
She's
I drove her nuts.
When you get to see something in person, man, you just it's so hard. It's a little easier these days than in the 90s to get a representative picture, but
Oh yeah, no, she was, man. I'd come down there. I'm like, I want to see the Burgundy. She's like, no, I don't. I'm like, they hadn't been breeding it yet, so they wanted to leave it alone. And I'm like, I just want to see it. So I think I went down there like 4 years in a row, and I only got to saw it the first time, and then I think like the third time, she wouldn't let me see it every time. I was like, come on. Because she like I said, she's just a really high strung snake. She just curls up in a ball, but after that, she's gonna light you up if you mess with her.
Woo!
They were trying to just leave her alone, and I just wanted to stare at her for days on end. But
yeah. So now that you've kind of worked with different lines and hatched out different Ultramels, do you think that you could tell the difference between, we've kind of talked about 3 different lines, like if you just had somebody randomly set them in front of you, can you tell the difference between the different lines, or is it they're just so similar?
No, I've produced enough from the Burgundy. I've seen. I used to think you probably could, but it was when I was still just breeding really tightly related, real close generations from the founder, and there was some tells, but that was just pattern. It wasn't color. And as you know, the pattern is very influenced with other genes. But no, the more babies I produced, they show a range. All of them show an overlapping range. I've had really dark ones, really light ones. It all just depends what else you breed it to.
And then that ontogenic change that they get as they grow up. You can see how much more like almost mustard yellow they have as babies compared to when they grow up. The colors cool down a bit and they get this nice caramel.
That's what I liked about them, is that they didn't get ugly as adults. I thought they were just as good looking as adults as babies.
Love that.
And I liked ball pythons, actually what they look like naturally, and so the caramel and the Ultramel and stuff like that. It was like, oh, it still has all the nice ball python pattern, with just more, just a more rich color. I thought so. Yeah, that's what always attracted me to it.
Definitely. So we did lay out, just sort of to revisit this timeline, thanks to the research that Ryan's done, how the Ultramel lines made their way into the U.S. So we've got your Ultramel line 1, or the original caramel that we saw in that news clipping, imported pre-1994, proven out in the US in 2005. Ultramel line 2, or the Burgundy albino with VPI and Ryan, imported 2000, proven in 2012. And then line 3, or the modern Ultramel as we know it, from Jim Sargent and Don Patterson, propagated in Africa pre-2006, and then brought to the US in 2006.
Yeah, so in 2006, Jim Sargent got those animals, and they were calling those African caramels for a while. They started getting called Noah line caramels. I believe that's the guy who was breeding them over there. Yeah, and then a couple of years, I think Don Patterson got some animals from Darren at Crystal Palace Reptile that were from the same bloodline, and he got those shipped to Canada. And when he opened the box, he was just blown away, and he was like, man, this is not, a caramel. And he said, we got to stop this confusion with this caramel, having caramel in the name. And so he thought the corn snake name of Ultramel made the most sense, because he was like, this is the ultra melanistic, so Don Patterson ultimately coined the name Ultramel, and then that quickly, everybody was quick to adopt that, because it got rid of any reference to caramel, which was good, due to the
good marketing
hesitancy of the And it was, it was a good name. Everybody kind of liked it.
Yeah. And it's the test of time so far.
Yeah.
And as far as figuring out the different lines, whether they were compatible or whatever, you played a part in some of that too, right? Like being able to figure out that they were actually allelic or compatible.
Yeah, there was still, there was questions early on. Like I said, the Burgundy was she was alive, but late to the game. So nobody really knew what the babies looked like. Nobody knew any of that stuff. When I hatched the baby, I was like, oh yeah, this has got to be the same thing as the Jim Sargent thing and the Kreider thing. I'd got the Kreider by then. And so at a certain point, I had bred a double het Ultramel pied that Jim Sargent had produced to the original het Burgundy that VPI produced. And I think that was 2015. And I produced 2 visual babies, which unbeknownst to me were, a homozygous A and B. But I just, we just assumed that it was, the same thing.
Yeah.
And so, I proved those to be the same snake. And then by deduction, you could determine that the other thing, I believe, I can't remember, I'd already bred the Kreider, I believe, to another Ultramel bloodline. But it was easy. It was at that point, you were like, oh, yeah, it's all the same thing based on the few breedings that had happened.
Yeah.
So then at some point, either you reached out to Dr. Hannah Sadell or she reached out to you and you sent her a bunch of sheds?
Yeah, I can't remember. I don't know if she posted a general looking for sheds or what or how. I honestly can't remember how that came about. It was probably me. I probably contacted her and I was like, look, if you're taking this seriously, I'm probably the only person that has these different bloodlines. Yeah. And so I sent her all the 3 bloodlines and the mixes. And then, she later determined that there was the 2 different actual mutations. And so that was quite interesting. But she never told me which one was which. And so so it wasn't literally until like a couple weeks ago that you told me. I sent you the same sheds from the same snakes to get the answer, to get the answers of which bloodline was which mutation. So.
Yeah. So there, we've talked about 3 different lines, and so Ryan sent individuals from those 3 different lines, and we ran the Ultramel A and Ultramel B tests. So like we've talked about on the show before, whenever you send a sample in to be run for Ultramel, we always test both. And so we just wanted to figure out, like Ryan just said, this is something he's been thinking about for years, knows that they're compatible, but didn't know, eventually found out there's at least 2 different mutations, but didn't know for sure which ones were which. And now we know, and it actually kind of lines up nicely that
the B goes with Burgundy.
The Burgundy is Ultramel B and everything else is Ultramel A.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Have you guys ever gotten sheds from like the European Burgagone?
I don't know for sure which line, but I do know that when I have run European sheds for Ultramel, I have been more likely to get B than A. But in the United States, in general, obviously not if I'm getting samples from you, but in general, I would get more Ultramel A than Ultramel B. But in Europe, it seems like there's more Ultramel B than Ultramel A.
Well, interesting. Then that makes. I think Tracy may have sent a pair of hets from her first clutch to Europe, but then they did have that Burgagone animal, and I can't remember if they had some other wild caught snake. And I've never had anything from that bloodline, so I was just curious if it had ever been determined. Because I know one of those Europeans told Tracy that they were compatible, which I wasn't surprised, but I didn't know if it was the same, A or B. So I didn't know if you would know that answer or not.
If anyone listening knows someone that has that Burgagone line or knows more of that history, definitely let us know in the comments. We would be interested, and if we can get sheds, it's harder from Europe. When we run stuff for people in Europe, they have to do CITES permits and stuff. But Clutch has done a good job of working out so that they can send them in batches from the UK, I think from Japan and South Korea as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so if you know someone and want to get sheds to us, reach out to us and we'll figure it out, because that would be cool to know if it's the same thing or not.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, it would be cool.
Awesome. And so I popped this up earlier, but people who have been contributing to the work that Brown et al. And Dr. Seidel have been doing for determining, where genetically these genes lie, doing the base work for a lot of what we already do and continue to do here at Rare Genetics. It kind of started with sheds. Ryan was one of the OGs for this.
Yep.
And we've put this up before, all of these different names. Well, look who's right in there. Ryan Young of Molecular Reptile.
Well, I mean, it was, it's pretty painless for me to just put it in an envelope and send it. So.
Yeah.
We're thankful every single day for people taking that time. It's not a lot, but at the same time, people are so busy and have so many other things going on that anyone that takes the time to make that a priority, that means a lot to us.
Yeah.
And very cool.
Well, the sad part is there's a little, some people that are not ball python people, they have a bit of, I don't know how you determine, they don't love ball pythons in the market and all that. And, they act like the morph breeding hasn't contributed anything. And I'm like, there's actually been a lot of science that's would have only happened, if with morph breeding, such as like the when they clone themselves, what is that called?
Parthenogenesis.
Yeah, parthenogenesis. That would have never, we'd had a hard time figuring that out without morphs.
And I mean, in this study, Brown et al. 2022, they pointed out, like in their abstract, they point out that so much amazing genetics work has been going on in the ball python hobby, in the reptile hobby in general. So much good genetics, like boots on the ground breeding work has been happening, and it's mostly untapped by the science community. So it's more, like the science world and the hobby world are starting to make nice a little bit more. And so this is where it starts. And I think it's a really wonderful thing.
Like I said, when I heard she was doing the albino stuff, I was like, oh, well, I'm in a unique position to, at the time, I was like, I'm probably the only one that knew exactly where the animals I had, which bloodlines they were from. So I thought it was important to contribute those.
Yeah, and that made that publication much more interesting. Sure, it also probably made it more of a headache for her, because she's like, okay, I have some Ultramels here that are clearly Ultramel, but they test as het. Like, why is this happening?
What's going on? Yeah.
But that's
I didn't know any of that until after it was published.
Yeah.
But it's because I did send her snakes that were both,
And that was huge. Because for her to be able to see, okay, this is clearly a visual Ultramel, but it tests het. That's when she, okay, there's got to be a second mutation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly. It must have racked her brain.
Yep. But it also makes a more interesting story, a better paper, and obviously much more helpful for all of us that later on want to do testing and stuff like that. So.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of cool too, because I always told people, the Burgundy was unrelated to their Ultramel project, and so it turned out, in fact, it was.
You've got very good evidence of that now.
It is right there.
Yeah, so whether Ultramel line and 3 are actually unrelated or not, it's hard to say. That it could have just been popped out, from the same wild snakes that made Ernie's animal. Their descendants could have ultimately made the bloodline 3's animals.
Yep.
It's hard it's hard to say how that happened, but
it's definitely likely the original mutation that led to line 1 and 3 is highly likely that it was the same incidence, but it could be a population that has 10 or 20% of the animals are het for it, but don't really hatch out a visual Ultramel very often. And
Yeah.
so they could be in that population for several years, and they could pick a baby out of there 1 year and then 10 years later pick another one out. And it's still that same original mutation, that same, incidence where that mutation occurred, but you collect those animals at different times, and everyone would have no idea of knowing unless you actually look at the DNA. But the probability of that exact same single base change happening 2 different times is not good.
Well,
Very,
then
very
there was one time when I was at the Barker's house, Dave showed me, I don't know where it was published or where he got it. I can't remember the dates. He showed me a picture of a ball python, like an early color photograph, but this was rough. Like you could tell it was some type of, it was either a caramel or an Ultramel. And I think the photo is from like the 40s or 50s.
Wow.
And it was like at a circus or something. I mean, I'm probably blowing this all, but I remember seeing the photo, and it was clearly one of those 2 mutations. And so, these things have likely been, obviously hatching for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So.
Yeah.
Since the hets look like a normal, it probably floats in the population for a long time. And whenever the few do hatch out being visual for it, they just get eaten real quick. So
Yeah.
That's probably why that Burgundy wild-caught female was so spicy. She was spicy enough to survive.
Oh yeah, well, she was a full-blown adult. She she was not a little snake.
Yeah.
So I don't know how old. Her fecundity does seem to be dropping off, but she still breathes, still lays eggs, and she's got to be. I mean, she was an adult in 2000, so you're talking.
Wow.
She's probably at least 30, 40, somewhere between 30 and 40 years old.
That's amazing.
And,
what a
she
girl.
still lays eggs.
That's amazing.
Well, that is an awesome story. I appreciate you taking, especially these last few days, taking extra time to look things up. And
yeah,
I love this kind of information. I think many of our listeners will as well. It's fun.
I'm a total nerd for that stuff. So
and like you and I think we're similar in age. And then thinking of Kayla, she said, "Oh, when that came out, that's the same year I was born." There's a lot of people listening. You and I are familiar with some of these names, of EPI and some of those people back then, but a lot of the younger keepers and breeders, they haven't heard these stories. So I think they'll get a kick out of it.
Oh yeah.
I hope so. It's I don't do a ton of ball python stuff. It's basically mostly Ultramel stuff, and I do a little bit of lavender stuff and lavender snow stuff, and a little bit of tri-stripe, but it's basically the vast majority of my collection is I just fell in love with the ultra stuff, and that's what I do. So I guess I pigeonholed myself a little bit, but it's
that's okay.
It's what still keeps me interested in it, and the bloodline stuff and my connections to them are, that's half of what keeps me interested in it.
Well, it's definitely had a very good effect in the long term, and also for the hobby. So we're grateful, and like we like to tell you guys, our audience, we really can't do it without you guys. So because that, Ryan, is our shed donor shout out for this week, unsurprisingly. Nice. We've got a few of the animals that you work with. These are just some listings on Morph Market that I pulled up. And you have some really cool scrub python and Stimson's python. I actually haven't even heard of that before. I love it. Oh,
nice.
So cool.
Yeah, it's mostly Ultramel stuff. That's what I'm into.
Well, they look good. And so we're really grateful to have you on here today, Ryan.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. It's fun to talk bloodlines with ball pythons.
Yeah, you don't hear that often.
No, I basically don't hear that ever with anybody.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's all we have for today, you guys. Ben, Ryan, do y'all have any closing remarks before we call it a day?
I guess this week we'll say Happy New Year. That's coming in 2 days. We're recording on Monday, so Happy New Year. Last week we said Merry Christmas. This week, Happy New Year. And thanks for being here and listening. And let us know in the comments what you liked and what you found interesting from this. And we appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
All right. Thank y'all. We'll see you next week and Happy New Year, or see you next year. You know. Okay, now outro in 3, 2, 1.